Hello, everybody. Welcome to Complete Crock Episode 2. I am King Crocodile here with my co-hosts Zarathustra Serpent and the Academic Agent. And today we're going to be talking about leftist overreach, the overreach of the left at this particular moment when it comes to when it comes to any kind of political advantage it might gain. And we'll talk a little bit more about what that means in terms of recent events, in terms of not so recent events. You two, academic agents, Zarathustra Serpent, where shall we begin?
Well, I mean, when I suggested talking about leftist overreach, I had specifically in mind there was a little moment there just after Charlottesville where it felt to me like the left really had the ball in their court. You know, I mean, I don't know about you guys, but when I saw white supremacists or white nationalists marching with flaming torches, chanting pretty unsavory things, I thought, okay, the optics of this are awful, and people are going to start listening to them. And I saw this immediately as a bad moment for us on the anti-SJW side. And we talked a bit about that last time. But then, in like the 2 weeks since that has happened, I've just seen them like they just don't know. How can I put this? They never know where to draw the line. And, you know, suddenly take down Confederate statues became, well, what about taking down Mount Rushmore? You know, it immediately jumped to like, oh, well, what about George Washington? He had slaves. What about getting rid of any monument to him? What about Abe Lincoln? It even reached the point where there was an article, I think it was in The Guardian, talking about like Nelson's column in London. And when you like, to me, that seems like a very slippery slope. And I'd hope that all of us around this table would be against taking down monuments in general, seeing something that seems like, I don't know, uncivilized or barbaric in a way. I mean, it's the sort of thing that unsavory groups have done throughout history. But it also made me think that the left basically just immediately lost their momentary advantage by overreaching, by pushing for things that no normal person is going to consider. So that's where really this I suggested this topic.
The people you talk about who made all those suggestions, I don't think they are really, the mainstream of the left. So I'm not sure how much people notice it even. You know, they might just think it's a fringe thing. So I'm not sure that in this case there's this big overreach, because so they're talking about taking down nobody takes it seriously to take down Mount Rushmore. There'll always be some idiot, and this is the internet age, and
well, so, I guess the two
any idiot can make an article.
The two big examples that happened was the little kid. Do you remember the kid with the free speech shirt on and the American flag? That free speech group tweeted a picture saying this is the future that we want to see.
UCLA.
Yes. And
ACLU. Sorry, ACLU.
The ACLU, and the other one was the the reporter called Robert Lee, who was pulled off the broadcast.
That was hilarious.
The Asian guy, and I don't know. I just feel that it almost immediately degenerates into absurdity to the point where those publications on the right, like Fox, like the Daily Mail, like the Telegraph, like any of the institutions on the right can just point and say, "Don't worry, they're still stupid," and all of the people who may have had their head turned for a moment just go back to thinking, "Oh, it's the loony left being idiots yet again." and the needle is kind of pushed back a little bit. Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, unfortunately, ACLU apologized. They allowed themselves to be pushed on this, which is
you see that as just significant?
This whole incident reminded me of something you said in your earlier videos about how these people tend to hold society to a utopian criteria without ever really realizing it. And this, I think, in this particular instance, this manifested in them sort of pushing the boundaries of, taking this momentary advantage that they had, and trying to immediately execute whatever vision of society that they would have had they had a vision of society. But they're sort of just moving in one particular direction and cranking it up as high as they can. Basically just holding. Yeah, sorry.
The thing that I am pushing a lot in my videos, the story. I'm trying to make the point that identity politics made sense up until the beginning of this decade, because people were actually being denied equality of opportunity because of their identity, and denied the possibility to advance in society because of identity. And that began in the 1960s. Began really, the focus became on that, on the identity. And did you watch the video on postmodernism that I just uploaded?
I watched the whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and
I talked about,
I watched most of it as well. Yeah,
I talked about the modern paradigm, and in the modern paradigm, there's the idea of progress towards creating the perfect man, the enlightened man. And so, for instance, one of the things about it was there was the idea that to create a perfect man, you had to be sexually healthy. This became a really big thing in this 19th century, even before Freud. The idea that if a man is not sexually healthy, if you're not sexually straight, if you allow all sorts of all sorts of what's the word, kinks, if you allow all these perversions to creep in, this will affect other things as well. So in this logic, things like homosexuality had to be repressed. It was against the picture of society, the picture of progress. Same with black people, because black people were seen as the culture was seen as regression to the jungle, to a more wilder, to the wilder roots of man. So if a black person in the West wanted to advance, they had to show that they had to behave like civilized people, which meant that they couldn't behave in the way that the dancing and moving and talking like black people.
Yes, the music, the music and the dancing, it was considered by society at the time to be indicative of the sexual deviance that was so characteristic of quote unquote savage peoples.
Musical style that was based on black music was at first termed a jungle music by people. This was ragtime and jazz and rock and roll. They all when they came out, the funk, they all, there was this is jungle music. This is regressing us back to the jungle. So because of this logic, because of this paradigm, they could not advance in society. Now, from the 60s, we started to fight against this and change this change this frame of mind in a way that will open up for those groups that could not advance, to allow. So it was to allow equality of opportunity. So basically, in the past 50 years, you had white people bending over backwards to allow blacks to basically advance to have equality of opportunity. Men bending over backwards to allow women, straights for gays and so forth. And this made sense until I mean when Obama was elected and you had Hillary in 2008. That was already when I started to say, I think this era is over, and I really felt like it was over in 2011, 2012 in the American elections, when you had a black president was re-elected, and people voted for gay marriage and all that. But also, this was the first time that I started to feel the overreach, because there was this the Democratic Party was using the propaganda as a campaign, the war on women by the Republicans, and it was based on some of it was on real things. There was this contestant. There was this.
The Hobby Lobby incident.
No, not the Hobby Lobby, but I mean the Hobby Lobby was, but there was this a nominee for a Republican who said that a woman.
Oh, the legitimate rape guy, Ted Aiken, I think.
Rape, yeah. The legitimate rape. He said that if a woman is getting raped, she can't get pregnant. So if she does get pregnant, it wasn't actually rape. It wasn't. She was lying about it. That's basically what he was implying. That's it wasn't legitimate rape, and then it wasn't really rape. So this is ignorance. Yeah. So there was still something to it, but with that they were lumping in so many things. I was looking into it, and I was saying, the Republicans, they gave the whole list of why the Republicans are doing a war, why they say that the Republicans are doing a war on women. So part of it was against Obamacare, and Obamacare, gives women all sorts of things, but it also gives men all sorts of things. Yes, so they were just throwing in some stuff so this is where I started to feel like it's going overboard. It's going really overreach, and since then, it really was taken over by those who want equality of outcome, but by the radicals. The whole idea of identity politics, and the problem is that society still hasn't. We didn't make the shift yet. Not everybody is aware as me. Yes. And so people are still in this frame of mind. This is the paradigm of our time, that you need to help blacks advance, and you need to help gays advance, and all that, and they're using it, and this is where this is what they're exploiting, and this is where the overreach comes from. This is the basic picture.
Well, I mean, some of this stuff I don't understand, like what the agenda is at all. Okay. I picked out. Hold on, I'm getting some echo here. Somebody got a speaker on?
Yeah, I muted Zarathustra. You can unmute yourself. It's just there appears to be a bit of an echo on your end. So whenever you want to talk, just unmute yourself and go ahead. Just keep that in mind.
Sure. Okay. So I have a number of different examples from literally just this past week of this sort of thing happening. Like, these are basically articles that have been run in the past week or so, and part of, like, I don't fully understand the reasons behind it. Like, so here's the one from The Guardian. It says, toppling statues, here's why Nelson's column should be next. And it's by Afia Search. Now, I read this, and one of the things I always do on these sites is I read all of the comments, and usually the comments are very hostile to the article. So I'm wondering, like, is part of the model of these things just what they call top-line trolling, where they're deliberately saying something stupid? But so this one was about toppling Nelson's column. This one was Labour MP floats idea of female-only train carriages. This happened 23rd of August. So there we go. They're talking about bringing back segregation on trains between men and women. This one, Salon. Masked man takes a sledgehammer to US's oldest Christopher Columbus monument. So now somebody's tried to smash up a statue of Columbus. This one, The Guardian editorial teams calls for internet censorship. This one, Tucker Carlson trolls the left by gushing over Trump looking at the sun, and they took the bait. And there was that thing going around that the eclipse is racist. You see that?
I did see that. That was ridiculous.
Trevor Noah.
I didn't.
So we'll come back.
Basically, there's a piece saying that because the path of the totality of the solar eclipse, which I was in, by the way, I saw that, it was incredible. But she was saying that because the path of totality was over predominantly areas that voted for Trump, the eclipse itself was a reflection, just a reminder of America's intrinsic racism, that everywhere where the shadow touches, there are so many racists.
Christ almighty. Yep, this one, Trevor Noah, America has turned into the Third Reich. This one made me laugh. Noam Chomsky sparks outrage after launching a scathing attack on Antifa. And in this article, which was published in The Independent, which I know is not what it once was as a newspaper, but like this was Noam Chomsky saying, hold on, Antifa are bad because they give the right talking points and they validate the very people you want to defeat. And
yeah, that's not a scathing attack on Antifa.
Yeah. Now, if you read that article, the journalist and various other people who I guess would be considered more mainstream or more normal leftists than Chomsky were attacking Chomsky for being old and out of touch for making that point. So now even Noam Chomsky is not left-wing enough for some journalists. Ridiculous moment. And then CNN, unmasking the leftist Antifa movement, activist seeks peace through violence. And then they quickly scrubbed the headline and changed it, saying, unmasking the leftist Antifa movement. They took away the peaceful part, I guess, pretty quickly after enough people had barracked them. So that was 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, just 10 articles over the past couple of days. That, I mean, what's the end? Like, what do they want? What's the end game of all of these? Like, obviously, all of these people aren't all on the same side. But the net effect of all these things for me is to say, well, these people are stupid. But
it seems to me, seems to me, at least from the business end of this news thing, that it's all just about clickbait. It's all about getting the clicks. It's all about getting the ad revenue. And if you have all this super controversial material, you're going to get outrage clicks. You're going to get people sharing on their social media. You're going to have, and of course, the people. I noticed, we talked briefly when we were deciding what to talk about today, about how you have this tendency of social media to show you only the groups and pages and people who are already agreeing with you on everything, how the algorithms are delivering you the products that you want, and that this cultivates this kind of echo chamber mentality. And I noticed that I sort of hop from echo chamber to echo chamber because I'm a masochist like that. I want to see what these different echoes are saying, and I notice all the time that whether you're in a left echo chamber or a right echo chamber, you are seeing people share these kinds of articles that you're showing here from the other side. But the other side is not sharing those same articles. They're sharing the articles that show the extreme of the other side. And these articles circulate and become very popular within these circles, within these networks.
Right.
I mean, it's the same thing with us, by the way. The skeptics and the SJWs, not really listening to each other, and highlighting the stupidity of on each side, and not really seeing, not really seeing in the mirror that. the bad behavior on both sides. Because yes, look, one example, I remember when Lacey Green, made when she came out and said, "I want to talk," Sargon, his first reaction was that first of all she needs to apologize for all sorts of things that she did. Eventually, he ended up apologizing to her for the way his fans behaved towards her, and he was not aware of it. And so yeah, because the video makers, it's all fun, and they're just most of them, all the pornage videos and all that, it's just in good fun. But then a lot of the viewers go and bully the people you make videos about, and we're not really aware of it. So we need to be more aware of the bad behavior on our side, and it's the same for every, like you said, it's the story of the internet, the story of the echo chambers. Where was I? Okay.
Yeah, I guess my biggest question with the one I've increasingly asked myself in the past couple of weeks is like, what's the end game for these people? What do they want? Like, the person who wants the Nelson column brought down.
They want utopia.
Clicks on their article.
They want.
Is it? Yeah. So this is the thing. Is it just clicks on the article, or is there some ultimate end game? Like, you pull down the Confederate statues, and then you pull down Mount Rushmore. Like, what's next? That's the question that never seems to get answered.
So,
it's like, well, and then what?
Okay, so I think there are different sides to this. You have the people in the media who are just cynical people trying to make money, and they're emboldening these activists to go out and do even more extreme and more crazier things so that the media will have even more to report on. And the activists in the meantime get favorable coverage, and they get they ostensibly recruit more people as a result of this favorable coverage. And these people, I think, are the ones whose end game is a mystery to you, not so much the people actually publishing the articles. At least this seems to me to be the relationship between, ironically, the capitalist newspapers and these irony of the ages.
So I don't know. I mean, last time we talked about how I feel like the oscillations are quite wild at the moment between which side in the culture war has the upper hand or is winning. Because at the moment, I see a lot of. I mean, I've just seen, like, even today, like, Nigel Farage has sent out a tweet saying people need to wake up to who Antifa are, and it feels like a lot more people are talking about Antifa than Nazis now than they are 2 weeks ago. Even trying to filter my own echo chambers, it seems like that word and who are the alt left and all these sorts of questions. That seems to have been to me, the outcome of Charlottesville was more that now lots of people are aware who Antifa are. Am I wrong? Like, maybe my initial despair was ill-founded, and in fact, it was a bad moment for the left rather than a good moment for the left.
I think maybe at the end of the day, Zarathustra is his opinion that he offered last time is going to be validated much quicker than we might have suspected. More people join Antifa and they realize, holy shit, maybe this isn't for me. I don't know if you saw the video of the guy, the bald dude who got punched because he was mistaken for a Nazi.
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, and somebody asked, "What are you doing here?" And he's sort of just he's saying, "I'm not sure." There's kind of a moment of clarity maybe there where he's realizing, maybe these fuckers on the hard left are no better than the fuckers on the hard right. Maybe I have no business being with these people who are just going to punch me without, even when I'm trying to help them. So I think as more people, enter into this conversation and more of them see what's going on and see, there really is problems on both sides, that they are going to crowd back to the center. It's going to ultimately be better for us.
Yeah, well, the moment you turn to violence, that's when you lose. I mean, not at that moment, but that's when you start losing, because then you really lose the public. That the public get wake up and see what you are. Uh, I was hoping we could avoid getting to the violence thing, although I knew it's inevitable. So basically, the way I see it, what we're doing is trying to minimize the damage that will be caused by the violence by precipitating, bringing them down faster, defeating them on the idea level. And
one question that King Crock asked when we were kind of chatting about this before was, why do you think they've become so arrogant and overbearing in the past few years? Like, what's the what's the change between 2010, say, and now? Why are they so unbearably obnoxious these days compared to what they used to be? Is it because they've started losing, or is there some other idea? I don't know, but I thought I'd throw out the question.
Look, a lot of them are coming now out of the academy because it took time. Like I said, it started in the 1960s. This whole idea of this the identity politics, and people. And it was controlled by I make the differentiation between liberals and radicals. It was controlled by liberals, people who believe in equality of opportunity. So that they were directing the discourse on it. Like I said, until it lost power because there's nothing to fight for anymore at the beginning of this decade. So the liberals are kind of have been pushed aside because they don't have anything to talk about anymore. They're actually against it now, against identity politics, and the radicals have taken over, and they are stronger now because over time they started to they reacted. The radicals were slow to react to that, to this change. They were still talking about, most of them were still talking about economy, about Marxist economy, and at some point they realized that it's about identity, and slowly adopted that and got into the academy and started churning out students, and we are getting now waves of those students. And since the liberals don't have anything to fight for at the moment, like I said, identity politics, our society is still in this frame of mind that we need to help all these marginalized groups, and the discourse on it is driven by the radicals, because there's nothing to fight for let's say for women, but people the only people fighting for women, talking about the whole women's rights, are radicals who claim that women are being oppressed, that there's a patriarchy, and they, as an example, that they're giving, the women are paid less, and that they're less represented and all that, and it holds sway with people because they don't really know the details. They just know that they've heard that women are being oppressed, and I mean, maybe not oppressed, but they have less there's prejudice against them, and the information that they're getting on it is coming right now from the radical left, and that gives power to the radical.
I think that this transformation of the left that we've seen over the past few years, I really do think that social media plays a central role in all of it. Think back to 2008. Facebook was only just beginning to explode at this point. And this was the election between President Obama and John McCain, at the time, Senator Obama. And this was, I remember they were calling it back then, the first social media election or something along those lines. That, people were going onto MySpace, which at the time was not quite dead yet. The potential for ad revenue during this sort of spike in coverage of the election online, that potential began to manifest itself. And then somewhere between 2008 and 2012, Twitter took off, became a big thing. And in 2012, you saw this really big explosion of social media that you hadn't seen in 2008 with regard to the election. And I think that in order to optimize these ad revenue profits, you first it was at this point that you have the first time these algorithms getting put into place where people are shown the material. You know, they look and see whose campaign material you are retweeting or sharing on your Facebook page, and they are basically inundating you with the kinds of ads and the kinds of groups and people that you are most likely going to be agreeing with. And it's at this point in around 2012 that you start to begin this kind of cloistering, this kind of echo chamber mentality, it seems. And this only continued to be cultivated over the following 4 years, getting worse and worse, reaching a kind of breaking point in 2014. Yeah, this great schism, and then 2016, everything goes to shit.
See, I don't just think it's the algorithms and the reflecting the stuff that you like back at you. I actually think the whole form is corrosive. Like I've only really started using Twitter this year. I kind of avoided it before then. I just thought, well, it wasn't for me. I thought, Facebook will do. But all of the little features of it are geared towards, if you think about it, polar. Like, I honestly think the like button is one of the most corrosive things ever to happen to intelligent discourse. I mean, a like is so easy to do, but there's a kind of positive reinforcement. Like I will not use the like button because I think it's like actively harmful. But like if I could get my own way, I wouldn't have it. Like I know, like I don't know, somebody posts a picture of a cute kitten or something, and it's easy to press like, but do you know what I mean? Like you get a like, and that's a positive reinforcement loop for you, and you feel good about the fact that you've got a like. But that encourages a certain type of tribalism where you're not really arguing with somebody or having a conversation. You're competing with them for likes.
Yes, who can come out with a snappier slogan? Who can sort of get people to Z-snap whenever they see a particular status.
I mean, I've had a bit of this recently when I've been talking to the bloody the socialists, the communists, and they all like support. One of them will write a comment to you, and then all of literally 10 of his comrades will come and like the thing that you've said, and it's all just like a kind of what is this? This is just like kind of like the most pathetic war possible, where instead of spears we've got like people clicking a heart. You know what I mean? But the symbolic representation of that magnified through these thousands and millions of users having all of these interactions which are I guess corrosively polarized along who can get the more likes, who can get the more retweets. The very language of following and followers, like it, I've got 1,200. I haven't got any followers. Like I don't want a follower. Do you know what I mean? Like I don't know. I find the whole form of it is. I thought about this before, like the Facebook, for example. The very fact that there's a status update makes you do statuses. Does that make sense? Like the very fact that the function exists will mean that you find yourself doing the thing that they've set up for you. And I find that whole thing strangely insidious in a way, where you are doing the thing you're meant to do that somebody else has designed because they've put the button there. And I find that whole thing creepy when it's manifested across society in the way that it has. I don't know if you guys have any thoughts on that.
I'm not sure I would blame the features, because I like the fact that I can get the feedback if people like or dislike something. It gives me some idea of what I'm doing. It doesn't mean I'm going to change because of that, it's information, and
they can give you feedback in written form. Doesn't it like have to be like this, on YouTube, the thumbs up and the thumbs down, they're completely meaningless. I've put videos up before and I've had 10 thumbs up before it's even bloody processed. Do you know what I mean? Like, within 10 seconds, you've got 10 clicks up. They haven't watched the video.
Yes. Yeah, some people will like you automatically, but it's not. But they will do it every time. So they are not making the change. That the question is, well, what was the change? Well, what was the net change between this video and other videos? And that gives you some idea. And I agree with Casey that the social media had something to do with it, and I agree with you that the internet encourages bad behavior, and one needs to learn how to. It is a problem. You need to avoid getting addicted to it. I never, for instance, use my phone to my mobile to surf to go on the internet. When I'm out of the house, I go offline because I don't want to be connected all the time. I will decide when I want to connect. The internet won't decide for me, and I think that this. A lot of people that are younger already so much into this world that they can't adopt this behavior. For them, it's part of them, and what it would lead to. To me, it seems unhealthy, but who knows?
Well, I can't help but get out of my head. I'm not a fan of Plato, but if you recall his kind of sociology, where you have this cycle between tyranny and then oligarchy and then aristocracy and then democracy, and then the cycle repeats.
Yes.
His use of the word democracy was what we would recognize as anarchism, basically. It was a direct democracy.
Mob rule, mob rule. When the mob is in control.
Yeah. As opposed to this kind of democratic republic, that this liberal democracy that we tend to be more used to. It seems to me that the internet, the internet is the manifestation of this mob kind of mentality that Plato said would eventually bring about a tyrant. Now, I don't agree with Plato, but this is just something in the back of my head that, like, oh shit, is social media going to be the death of Western civilization?
Well, the whole culture of dogpiling, whether it's SJWs, Bearing fans, bloody, it doesn't matter who's doing it, like communists. It doesn't matter, because I've had, you must have seen it sometimes where you get like an upswing of like, who the hell are these communists? I don't recognize these names. Why has this video got 80 thumbs down? Like, where's this come from? Oh, right, it's a coordinated, mindless attack of a particular group, and that sort of behavior has generated, policy decisions, companies reversing how a product is going to go. It's got people fired, and it's completely mindless. So I don't know how you stop that.
That's good and bad. That's
where's the good? Like, where's the good?
Look, this whole first of all, the fact that think about the effect in unfree countries, in dictatorships. The fact that people go on the internet, they get so much information and behavior and all that things that were previously that they didn't have access to, and it changes their mind to think more freely, to be more, to think like free people. It's not necessarily by reading ideas. It's even just by watching how free people act, how free people behave. People in democratic societies, how they behave, it changes you when you are. So that's one thing. The other thing is, like I say all the time, I think that eventually the good ideas are stronger and spread and will. internet is about memes. Yes, it's the thing that spreads, and then the question is who's going to win the meme war? Is it the bad ideas or the good ideas? And I think that the good ideas will eventually triumph.
But you see, I guess what concerns me as an academic is that, I mean, often it's not a case of an either-or proposition. Sometimes there's levels of nuance involved. Sometimes the answer to a problem isn't always straightforward or simple. And I mean, I just remembered this. A few years ago, I was thinking about writing a book called Rating Things. I was really interested in, I don't know, about 10 years ago, there was a big emphasis on top 10 lists, rankings. There was you got on the internet and everything was rated, Amazon's star rating system and IMDb and I was thinking about writing this book, and then I started to kind of get into trying to analyze internet ratings, and by far the two most used ratings on sites are 5 stars and 1 star. Believe it or not, people tend towards the polarities, and it feels like as time has moved on, they have streamlined that into just a thumb up or a thumbs down. Like, it's no longer even, I think this is a 3.5, I think this is a 5, or I think this is a 2.5, or an 8 out of 10. It's now just yes or no.
That's what they did to
yes,
YouTube.
That's what they did. It's known that that's what they did. That they realized that people will rate it either 5 stars or 1 star, so they said, let's get rid of this whole thing and just thumbs up and thumbs down.
I mean, is that a good is that a good thing? I don't know. Like, to me, how about just not giving any of those things and just giving a space for somebody to write a comment? Like,
well, look,
I don't know. I feel like the level of discourse will go down if you keep on giving people these kind of shortcuts that stops them ever having to think about anything.
But I find IMDb to be actually a rather good indication of whether a movie is well, I don't know. No, it's not about quality, but it's about how enjoyable is it, and there's even quality, and because people do appreciate quality. If you go on IMDb and you look at the list of the most the highest rated movies, some choices seem. I mean, I hate Forrest Gump. It's one of the highest rated movies.
Right. Okay.
I hate it, but generally it's good movies. So because when you have tens of thousands of people rating, you will get and there actually it's 1 to 10, I think. You will get a good indication.
I wonder, Zarathustra Severin, you said that in the open marketplace of ideas, it's the best idea that will tend to win. And I tend to agree with that. Where I disagree, or where I'm a little bit ambivalent, is I'm not sure if the internet, as it's currently constituted with the algorithms and the sort of thumbs up features and all of these sort of, I'm not sure if the internet really is this open forum where the best idea can thrive. It seems to me that
I don't even agree with the original proposition. I don't even think in academia the best idea always wins. But I can go into that more in a second.
You're pessimistic about human nature. And as for what you said, Casey, I think the nature of the internet is a free market of ideas. All those things that you talked about are hitches and hindrances and all that. But overall, I find that the internet you overcome all that. In the end, the ideas trickle through, even with all this blocks and that people can put on it.
Let me tell you what I mean. Why I don't think the best idea always wins. Even in academia, even in the university setting, okay, nuance doesn't sell. Like it, how can I put this? It's usually the person with the most extreme thesis who will become the most famous in that field. Not the person who says, oh, well, there are arguments on both sides, and it's a little bit of this, or it's usually the evolutionist, the evolutionary theory guys we know are guys like Richard Dawkins. Like Richard Dawkins is pretty hardcore on a lot of his takes within evolutionary theory, and he takes no prisoners with his kind of academic opponents. But he's the one that the man on the street, if they've heard of one biologist, they've heard of him, right? And that seems to be how it goes across the board. Like the most famous, or the most highly paid, or the most prestigious are usually the ones who've stuck their neck out and taken a quite extreme position. It always seems to me that the truth, the nuanced position, on the whole question that we were talking about a couple of weeks ago with the nature nurture thing, with the how much behavior is driven by cultural reasons and how much is driven by biology. Like, we all know the answer is that it's one or the it's a little bit of one and a little bit of the other, right? We all know it's somewhere in between and not either of the extremes. And yet, which are the ideas that predominate? Which are the, like, in the debates that we see, the form they take, it's usually goes to the extremes. Like, I mean, the radical left push it towards the total social constructivism, and the sorts of arguments I see from many people on the right, I mean, they want to take it straight down to IQ determinism, So
That's only a few people, though. I mean, the mainstream position on the hard left. I mean, I have Steven Pinker's book with me, right next to me, actually, The Blank Slate, one of the best books I've ever read.
Great book,
he outlined in the very beginning that the debate is broadly between two camps. You have this extreme position on the hard left, where everything is socially constructed, and this moderate position, where it's a combination of the two. This position of this determinism, he keeps insisting, does not exist, or at least doesn't exist inside of the academy. It's sort of off in the fringes, and you're the millennial woes of the world and so on.
The biological determinists. Yeah, but that's not how the left will see him. The left won't see Pinker or Dawkins as moderates. They'll see them as being like, primarily because they're so extreme themselves. They will see them as essentially being people who want to argue for what they call essentialism.
Right. But my point is, Pinker is a kind of counterexample to this notion that it's only the extremes that get cited. I mean, I can see definitely how at least in the social sciences, often you can, there are people who put forward very controversial ideas. If you look at Sandra Harding, who I've been railing against in my Science Wars videos, she was a nobody prior to her 1986 book, The Science Question in Feminism. Nobody really knew or cared who she was. But she put in that little line in there about how Newton's Principia is a rape manual, and suddenly she becomes an international kind of. Everybody's talking. They give her 15 minutes, and just a few years later, she ends up at UCLA. Her citations skyrocket as a consequence of all this engagement.
Yeah, she made a splash. She made a splash.
Yeah. Look. You said before.
She didn't have the best idea. She just made a splash.
You said before, even in the academy, it's like that. I guess you don't know my view of the academy.
Right, okay.
I don't respect the academy very much, and I don't think the academy is really having much of an effect on the way people think. Most people are not really interested in those debates. They get the information from pop culture, and pop culture, it's mostly about having fun, and so it's not extreme in the and what people get from that, again, it's not philosophy. It's not that. It's just behavior that people are getting, which is basically a behavior of free people, of not extreme in any and the academics that find the way into pop culture tend to have the extreme positions, but nobody's really, very few listen to them. Look, the academy, students come in, they're morons, okay? They think that they are, I mean, the students who are involved in politics, I mean, they think they know everything, right? The young people, they think they know everything because they're smarter than most people their age, and they know nothing. And they adopt these extreme positions, and so they make the more extreme positions more popular. But it doesn't have much of an effect on society. I always look. Jordan Peterson, I think he said once that the gender studies have I think he said 300,000 in the last couple of decades. People came out of gender studies as idiots. Okay, so as brainwashed, basically. Okay, 300,000. That's about the amount of people that watch a Sargon of Akkad video, every video. So one person on the internet his reach is as much as all the academies put together, or the gender studies in the academies put together, and he's just one. Yeah, there's many more. So and look, and again, I don't think it's Sargon of Akkad that is being. I think it's people like the more popular YouTubers, people like PewDiePie. Okay, so he's not talking politics. But there's this politics of everyday life, which comes through his behavior, and all the other peoples as well, and they are not extreme, and this is what most young people are listening to, and where they get information from.
But I mean, in a sense, and I hate to say this, but in a sense, it almost doesn't matter what the general populace think, okay? Because the general populace have been routinely ignored by the governing classes, since time immemorial, because they are the great unwashed masses. So who cares what they think? We know better, of course, and us knowing better, that means we should push ahead with, BBC Pigeon or whatever other thing you want to foist on.
Nobody will listen to that Pigeon thing. Nobody will listen.
It doesn't. Well, it doesn't. I guess the point is, it doesn't matter if nobody will listen, or if they decide it's a good thing and people need it, then they will go ahead and do it. And the people you need to convince are the
what will that achieve? What will that change?
A feeling of self-satisfaction for those exact people.
It will have no effect on society. And as for politics, the politicians they can only work within in a democracy, especially they can only work within the parameters of what public opinion allows. Left or right, even if they don't respect, like you say, the views of the masses, they still have to take them into account when they take the decisions.
There was one thing I saw that I thought I did want to share with you guys. You mentioned the gender pay gap at one point, Zarathustra. Did you guys see this? See if you can see that. Can you see that?
Yeah, I think Okodak left for a moment, but okay, let me see.
Have you seen this? Because this is something else that I thought was interesting. So basically, what's happened is that.
But the question is she being ironic? Is she just satirizing? What we say to them?
I don't know, but this is also something that's going to happen, because this has been the trend for a while now, where the women are out earning the men. I don't know if you saw that the other fairly widely cited article where young professional women are struggling to find partners of
Yeah,
this who earn the same as them, and
that's
they
when.
see this as also as an issue. So I'm wondering if some of these movements will naturally run out of steam, where the hard reality of the fact of the changed outcomes will, uh, you know, I guess, take away the win from the sales of the victimhood narrative. Like, how can you be a victim if you're now out earning these people as well?
To me, that's obvious. I mean, that's what I always say. Is that I've been saying this in this conversation as well, right? That the SJWs are relying on the fact that people are still in the old frame of mind, and once this frame of mind changes, they will have nothing, because they're the those who ideologically believe in this ideal, in the radical left SJW thing. It's a very small group. The power relies on the fact that people are still in the frame of mind that women are being need to be helped to advance, and that minorities need to be helped to advance, and all that. And slowly the information gets through that that this is not the case anymore, and more people are realizing this, and then this is then they will lose the power, the radicals, the radical leftists, because this is what their power relies on. That they make it seem like they are fighting for equality, and people see them as people want equality. Yes, people in society, we live in the society, and we live in liberal societies, and people want equality. And but the idea of most people, when they think of equality, they think of equality of opportunity. And they don't realize that the radicals are talking about equality of outcome. So once this information gets through and reaches a critical mass, then you will see the change. And to me, that's inevitable. I mean, we can speed it up with the work that we're doing. But to me, that's always been inevitable. So see on because it seems that on YouTube, for instance, everybody has got it already. And and that's the young people.
Crock, are you back?
So it's the older generation.
Yes.
Just while you were there, I was wondering, did you see that? I just
Yeah,
put it.
yeah, I saw it.
I thought that was funny, but we've just been talking about what happens when inevitably, I mean, in that age bracket, women are out earning men, and essentially we were just saying, when the reality of that becomes so overwhelming that you can no longer push a victim narrative, will the wind be taken out of their sails, or will they just find new injustices?
I think that people will. I think that people tend to be rational only when it's in their own rational self-interest to be rational.
Right. Okay. So, did you guys want to touch on anything? I have just seen in the live chat somebody asked me a question. But did you guys have anything else you want to touch on before we wrap this up today?
Well, why don't we talk a little bit about postmodernism? Agent and I were chatting a little bit about your video, Zarathustra, before you came in. And maybe we could talk a little bit about any differences of opinion we may or may not have.
Mm-hmm.
Sure. Let me quickly answer this question. Is it just, dear academic agent, do you know where the Kiel University has gone SJW yet? My understanding is that Kiel University was always a pretty radical far left institution. It's been a hub of the British New Left, for a very long time now. So if Keele University hasn't got an SJW yet, I'd be very, very surprised. It's always been one of the more radical campuses in this country, along with the University of Sussex. So just FYI. Okay, postmodernism. So if people haven't seen Zarathustra's Serpent's latest video on postmodernism, I would recommend watching it. I'm about 42 minutes of the way in, and then Game of Thrones came on. So that's basically where I am. But do you want to give us like the quickest possible notes on it? Zarathustra, like the kind of like 3 bullet points that people should take away, and then I will offer some immediate thoughts that I had.
Well, okay, I made the video. It's after Armored Skeptic made a video about postmodernism, explaining postmodernism or something like that, and superficial as usual. And Dr. Lehman criticized him, and I jumped in because I think people don't really know online and in the scatosphere have really, most people have no idea what they're talking about when they talk about postmodernism, or at least don't understand where it comes from. So basically, I've been given the historical outline, and first of all, I said that postmodernism is the idea that the modern age has collapsed, and when they talk about the modern age, they talk about the age that begins at the end of the 18th century. So basically, it's when the ideas of enlightenment started to become real politics, and after the French Revolution and the American Revolution, and there was a paradigm shift which brought on this idea of progress, progress towards in which man basically liberates himself by exploring himself and learning more about himself, and because the idea, this is the old Socratic idea that the human nature isn't bad, but because people are ignorant, because man is ignorant, he does bad things. And so the idea of enlightenment is if man learns the truth about himself, about the world, the more you know the truth, the more you become. So this is a liberation of man, of humanity, and with this, the more and more we know the truth, the better people we become, the more moral people we become, and in the end we can devise a perfect society, or near perfect society, an enlightened society. And the idea of postmodernism is that all the foundations that this form of thinking stood on have collapsed, and we are left now with, it's not just that it's collapsed, but there's nothing, there's no meta-narrative to replace it, except actually the meta-narrative now is that everything is a narrative. And the question is, how do we deal with this situation? So the idea that postmodernism was the thing that caused this collapse of narrative, it's not really true. It happened in the modern age. The postmodernism is the result of that. As philosophers recognizing that we are in this in this situation, in this condition, and need to do something about it. And so I gave basically Foucault and Derrida, basically the only philosopher of this whole bunch that I think has any merit is Foucault. So I've talked about him a bit, and Derrida, not Derrida, Lyotard, his book, The Postmodern Condition, is a pretty good summary of the postmodern condition. So I reviewed that as well. And then I gave my and the question is, how do we react to this situation? I also said that the postmodernist moment has basically passed, because we have our confidence in the ideals of enlightenment has been reignited. Basically, because we are assured, compared to what it was after World War II, after the Holocaust, after the atomic bomb, during the Cold War, with the collapse of communism and all that. So isn't very popular anymore. But I'm not seeing any alternative, and then I offer my alternative, which is basically my the thing that which I claim that we are in the pop age, and I'm basically trying to write a philosophy of pop. So I gave you say that you're in the 42nd minute. That's actually when I start talking about it.
Yeah, so that's the bit I missed.
Yeah, the last 10 minutes. And I give just a short overview of what I'm talking about and how it comes out of this postmodern condition.
Okay, let me offer you my little critique of the last 10 minutes, and then I'll let Agent talk about the first 42. You seem one of my biggest issues with postmodernism, and especially with postmodern criticisms of science. You know, I'm making a video right now dealing with the post-colonialists and their conception of science. One of my biggest problems is this notion that there is a plurality of truths, that everybody sort of has their own truth, or at least in this context, every sort of group has its own truth. Every society has its own ethno-science. And in your kind of pop view of how things ought to be, you also seem to subscribe to some sort of plurality of truth as well. So I don't know if I'm maybe mischaracterizing or what, but there's something about that rustles my jimmies a little bit.
Yeah, truth. The way I truth. The problem with the claim isn't that there isn't objective truth. The claim is, one, we don't well, first of all, can we decipher? Can we figure out what the objective truth is? And the biggest question is, and this is how do we know that we found the objective truth? If a scientist finds a theory that correctly explains something, how does he know that he found the truth, the correct theory? There's no way of knowing. So
I think I might have to disagree there. If we look at it from a purely instrumentalist perspective, you could say that a scientist is justified in accepting the validity of the theory based on whether it can accurately predict future data. You know, if you have your novel testable hypothesis, and
you don't know if it's the truth. You don't know.
You know, when you go Z, you can say, you know, okay, this regularity does exist.
That's a fact. That's not that does not prove the theory. Does not prove that your theory is correctly correctly explains the law of nature.
Well, when I think of a theory, I think of a network of facts and laws that are all sort of connected. You know, it's not really reducible to any individual one, but that which altogether is used to accurately make predictions. You know, whether
you don't know if in the future, you know, it won't collapse when we know more. We might realize that it does not correctly predict everything. It just correctly predicted the small part of the universe that we inhabit.
Right. Within a certain scope, but like at every stage, I think it's understood that you know, whatever accurate predictions are made, they're not generalized to all circumstances and at all possible configurations. You know, if you look at,
okay,
for instance,
then it's not the truth. so and the idea
Maybe we're just disagreeing on what truth is.
Well, the idea is the classic idea is that there is universal and eternal truth, that if you can find it, that then you will be able to basically predict everything about, in this, and at least that pertains to this. And the idea is also that once you find, when you find a truth, there's an experience that, and this comes from Plato and many other people after him, that if you see the truth, there's this light that fills you. It's an ecstatic experience. And what I'm saying is, we don't know, since we can't know what the objective truth is. Truth, when I talk about truth, I talk about the experience of truth. And we want to experience that. We want to experience that ecstatic experience. And since I don't believe that it came from people actually seeing the truth. See, that was, I asked before, how do we know that it was the truth? That was the criterion. If you feel that it fills you up with the light of truth, then you know that you found the truth. That was the criterion. And I'm saying, well, you know, since those people we know today didn't see the truth, and yet they many of them just contradict each other, and yet they all report that they felt this light of truth. So it must come from something else. So this truth experience, this ecstasy, is the thing that I talk about when I talk about truth. And I said that pop music is ecstatic, and all the styles of pop in the 20th century were ecstatic at the core. And there was this truth, the truth of the style, when you have to feel that there's this real experience, which where the fans of the style know what I'm talking about. They discern between real jazz and fake jazz, between real rock and roll, fake rock and roll, real trance, fake trance. You hear it from every style, every fans of every style in the 20th century. It gives them the experience of that they associate with the style, and this experience for them was the truth. They saw it as something that was their truth. So when I talk about truth, I talk about an experience, because when it comes to we don't know anymore how to reach it. That doesn't mean that we say that there isn't objective truth. There are facts, and there is. You can believe that there is objective truth, but you can't know it. Or if you can know it, you can't know that you know it. So the pursuit of truth takes a back seat. Or I mean, you still pursue truth. You still pursue again. Like you said, you have a different definition of truth. You still look for a theory that you still treat the universe as a puzzle that you're trying to solve, even though you don't think you will be able to solve it. So the problem here is that since Socrates, we believed that truth, good is dependent on truth. That if we don't know the truth, we can't be good, and so we can't be moral if we don't know the truth. And I disagree with that. I think that morality does not. We can be moral people, and we can form an ethics without knowing the truth.
Well, I mean, I think I don't know if it's coherent to speak of an ought without some reference to is. You know, if we're talking about what a person ought or ought not do, we have to invariably at some point speak about some state of affairs where you'll have one state that we consider to be a moral state of affairs. You have another state where you consider to be an immoral state of affairs, and these states have to be defined in reference to something that is generally agreed to exist. So it does seem to me that some conception of truth is necessary in order to even be able to talk about morality.
There are facts. I don't. You can still believe in facts. You can still make true statements about facts, but not about. You can't. So when we say we don't believe in truth anymore, it's we don't believe that we can create this theory that explains everything and can is the godly truth.
I don't know. My feeling would be that to take your example with songs. I was just thinking. You said that a lot of 20th century pop art was about ecstasy. I was thinking of Lou Reed, and that seemed to me more about heroin. And that's not just a lame joke, but we know enough about human biology and about the effects of something like heroin, and then you can see those effects in a song like this seems very mundane, but I would see art and songs and stories and all of these different modes of human expression as reflecting different aspects of the human experience, and the facts of which we can understand through things like evolution and biology and psychology, and we do know things about us. People have done lots of studies on these things, and if an artist can tap into some authentic experience they have, and we can call that the truth, quote unquote, then so be it. If the Lou Reed song speaks to a heroin user, and he recognizes that as being something real, then they're getting to a kernel of truth. And it's important that we in talking about art in that way, that in itself is a very modernist idea. To come back to this modernist versus postmodernist thing, it seems to me that the modernists always had some kernel of truth at the heart of what they were doing, even though another aspect of what modernism was in a sense breaking with some of the forms of the past. So it was at once new, but also coming back to some idea of what is what is true. It was kind of a hybrid of those two different things. That's my understanding of it. I don't know that much about it. I do have a master's in modernism, but I don't know that much about it. But I'm thinking about something like I always think of like T.S. Eliot or Ezra Pound, or some of the poets of modernism. And if you read them, it's they're fragmenting everything that we've known up until this point, but it's something that could have only been written in the 1930s. And their whole point was we shouldn't make these. They were reacting to the Romantics, those guys. They were saying like you shouldn't kind of. It's complex to explain exactly what modernism is, but would you agree that regardless of which form modernism takes, most of them still have a kernel of truth there? I mean, even in someone like Samuel Beckett, there's a kernel of authentic experience in his plays that he's trying to capture what it is to be human, say in the most in the most general way. I think
the idea is that in a lot of those modernists, that the true we actually our traditions actually prevent us from getting to the truth, and we need to get to it in different ways, and and usually not by using our reason, but
Right.
by imagination or just stuff like that. From which we can go beyond reason and touch something that is the truth that is beyond it. Things like that.
What makes me a little bit uncomfortable about the current conversation about truth is we seem to be treating it as a psychological phenomenon. We're beginning from this point of truth is just this feeling, or something that actuates this feeling within us, this authenticity, whatever that means.
Yeah. Well,
But
I told you.
Sorry?
I told you why. I told you why. Because the idea has always been, look, from Plato to Descartes to the 18th century, the idea, how do we know that this is the truth? The idea is because our mind is divine. It comes from a divine place. And so when we touch the divine truth, we just know. That, like there's in Plato, there's levels of truth. Yes, like how do I know that I'm speaking to you right now and not just dreaming that I'm speaking with you? I somehow know it's more vivid. It's more vivid than a dream. So the idea is that when you actually touch the absolute truth, it will be a much stronger experience. So the psychological experience has always been connected to truth. So when I talk about the truth experience, that's what I'm talking about. And
so let's maybe pivot then from talking about truth to talking about knowledge, which Plato called justified true belief. When I'm thinking of, maybe what I was defining as truth in this kind of scientific sense, I really meant in the Platonic way for knowledge.
But
would you say there's?
I think you can connect the two things, though, because you can have, say, knowledge of what, I don't know, joy is. Let's just say human joy. Now, there'll be a psychology of joy, and there'll be research papers written on the psychology of joy, and there'll be a biology of joy, as in what chemical reactions are happening when we experience joy. And there will be the representation of joy, which will be, an artist writing a joyful. So let's say the Beatles, I saw her standing there, an expression of teenage kind of love across the dance floor. Okay. Now you can explain that from biology, from psychology, but you can also just recognize that is something that we've all had that experience, and we recognize the joy there. And you can say, well, that whole thing is authentically true. Does that make sense? You connect the two things.
Yeah, it's unmediated. Yeah, our feelings are unmediated. Unlike a thing that you read, you don't have to read about it. You feel it. It's unmediated.
I guess what I'm saying is that a lot of I guess a lot of what we see is what has been written up as these profound truths in art could also just be these rather mundane human things put into a form that we can recognize reflected back at ourselves. But the scientific explanation of what's happening would be actually quite mundane. But we're human, and we like to express ourselves, etc. So
when I talked about the truth of pop, I said it's the spirit of the times. So it's a particular thing for a particular time. Casey, I thought you were going in another direction. So
yeah, well, okay, let's grant this definition of truth then as this kind of phenomenal experience that comes from authenticity.
So this is important for what I understand as the postmodern to be, and it was something that I understand there to be two slightly different two basically different definitions of postmodern or postmodernism. And if I was to critique what you said in the video, Zarathustra, it is that you kind of oscillated between these two different senses of it within the same video. One sense is that we live in a postmodern moment. The postmodern condition is a symptom of our times. We live in the moment of late capitalism, and because of that, the authentic moment is not possible to us anymore. The modernist truth, quote unquote, is inaccessible in the postmodern moment. And the example they always give is Las Vegas. Okay, you go to Las Vegas and you see New York and you see Paris, but it's not New York and it's not Paris. It's a facsimile of New York and of what you imagine Paris to be. And in fact, in the most extreme version of this idea, you actually go to New York or you actually go to Paris, and those things are, even those things themselves are no longer themselves. They're simply the pastiche of themselves. It's probably easier to see in the pop world, where you no longer have a band, an authentic band, but the pastiche of what you think a band might look like. In the most extreme examples of this, even the Beatles weren't. I mean, it's hard to know where to draw this, but in the most extreme examples, certainly when Frederick Jameson was writing this stuff, he would have thought that the Beatles aren't truly authentic, that they were only ever a postmodern pastiche of what a pop band should be, which is, it seems bizarre, but you have some of this Frankfurt kind of snobbishness in there. You know, the Frankfurt School, they had this. They thought that pop culture was.
And that's why I think this whole thing is bullshit, because they just don't appreciate. I talk about it in the video that they don't understand pop culture, and so they don't understand the spirit of our time.
Oh, okay, so that's one sense of the postmodern, not something that we have a choice over, but something that we're just kind of trapped in, and we can no longer get to authenticity because this is a symptom of late capitalism. And you can tell that's the more Marxist-y kind of way of thinking about the postmodern. But then you have this more positive sense of postmodernism, and this is where I think Lyotard was really going with this. See, I don't think Lyotard was talking about the postmodern as something that we're trapped in. In the way that somebody like a Frederick Jameson or various other Marxist writers talk about. They're still thinking in that Marxist way of paradigms and of moments in history. Foucault more towards this, I think. But Lyotard, I think, was arguing for postmodernism as something that we should strive for, as a good thing, as a we need to break the rules. We need to break free of these oppressive meta narratives. We need to bust them open. We need to, in the art world, we need to just like smash even the idea of rules up in art. That was Lyotard's call, a much more radical, almost like the moment in Fight Club where they're going around like smashing all the windows up. Like that is closer to the postmodern in Lyotard's sense, as a kind of as an aesthetic, as something to achieve, as opposed to something that we're trapped in.
I don't feel that coming from Lyotard. He does embrace it. I mean, he says this is what the world we live in now, and we have to accept it and embrace it and see what we can do in it. So there's no going back. Yeah. So in that sense, yes. In that sense, let's make the most of this world where competing narratives and all that. As for things you said, look, the thing you said before, it's more. It comes more from philosophers. This whole idea of hyperreality and all that. That comes from people like Baudrillard and people that I don't read and don't respect, because I think that the heart of postmodernism is Foucault and Lyotard, and the other guys come later and. Well, they have their versions of postmodernism, but to me, I was trying to explain what basically the heart of postmodernism is, why postmodernism happened, and I think for that, when I learned postmodernism in the academy, we were talking about Foucault and Lyotard and a little bit about Derrida. Because those are the philosophers. Like I said, the only one I think who has merit is Foucault. 50 years from now, he's the only one I see that will still be talked about. So this whole idea of hyperreality and all that comes from, like I said, because they don't understand the pop world, they don't understand pop culture, so they think it's all inauthentic. And that's just wrong. They're just wrong. They don't understand the way that people in today's culture think. Pop culture has changed the paradigm. We think differently. We define truth differently. We define authenticity differently. They just don't understand it. And look, it happens within pop itself because. Every time so in the 60s, rock and roll was considered inauthentic, and then in the 70s it was disco, and they were seeing every pop style also sees each other as inauthentic. The rock and roll kids see the disco kids as inauthentic, and the funk kids see the disco and the rock and roll as inauthentic, and all that. They were all authentic. They all had the truth, a kernel of truth, which is this experience, and so those postmodernists that talk about all the fake, the simulacra, this is all nonsense. They just don't understand the time. So I didn't even deal with it.
Lyotard strikes me mostly as a kind of opportunist. Coming at this from a science criticism view, he spends a good chunk of the postmodern condition railing against so-called technocrats and against the application of science. He was really against systems theory, and he was basically calling the entire scientific activity a kind of meta-narrative in order to preserve a kind of unjust state of affairs, to limit people's freedoms. And it seems to me that what he was trying to get at was he wanted to say, okay, this is the condition that we find ourselves in. We have all of these different meta-narratives. We
don't have meta-narratives.
Sorry?
We don't have meta-narratives. The postmodern conditions is the incredulity towards meta-narratives.
Yeah. What he was saying, though, is that you have all of these different types of meta-narratives that people were skeptical of, and that the goal now should be not so much to get past the meta-narratives, but to sort of take control of them in order to achieve a certain state of affairs, in order to achieve what he probably would have thought was greater freedom.
That's not what I read. To me, it's just the acceptance of that the meta-narratives have collapsed, and we are living in a world of competing narratives. And when he talks about science, he talks about this idea that scientists, because we don't have the meta-narrative of liberation anymore, the truth liberates us. Science cannot justify itself, and philosophy as well. They cannot justify themselves as just we are looking for truth. You will not get funded anymore by saying, look, there's no value anymore in saying I'm searching for truth. You're going to have to now prove the value of your research differently.
And there was a part that stuck out to me in there regarding sort of the justification of science, and how it could be channeled in a manner that would be beneficial to Lyotard and whoever he happened to be supporting.
Really? Can you point me to that?
Yeah,
Let's read it again because it's a short book.
Yeah, I'll look up the part right now. Give me a second.
Okay, just a minute. I'll
Or
go and get it.
you can keep talking, and I'll pull it up in the meantime.
Just a minute.
Yeah.
I'm getting the book. So
Sure. I mean, my understanding has always been that he's arguing for the postmodern condition rather than trying to account for it. That this is something that we should be aiming for, not something that has already happened. That would be my understanding of things. But
my understanding is that he wanted to take advantage of this state of affairs. But let me pull it up right now.
you know, while you guys are looking, my bloody colleague who ended up leaving has my copy of the postmodern condition. He borrowed 3 books off me, and I lent me one in return. And then he left, and when he cleared his desk and took all his books with him, never gave me the books back. So and I don't think I'm going to buy it again.
if you can't find it, we can just read it and do it next time. Read it again, both. And...
No, I have it here somewhere. Just give me a minute.
I will not be buying the postmodern condition again.
It's not that great a book. It's just I think a good a good point.
But I mean the reason I raised that is because I do think that the idea of the simulacra and the inauthentic self and all of that, I do think that side of postmodernism, the Frederick Jameson, the more Marxist variant of it, has been as influential as Lyotard within the academy. And when people talk about the postmodern, they could be talking about the meta narratives breaking down, or they could be talking about this idea of the simulacra, and there's a lot of slippage between those two actually quite different concepts.
Yeah. So to me, in the video, I forgot to mention before, I claim that the neo-Marxists are using postmodernism to basically disguise the neo-Marxism. That's another thing that because I claim that I mean yes, there is this side that comes from Marxism and talks about simulacra and all that, but there's also the
cultural logic, they call it, the cultural logic of late capitalism. Yeah, carry on.
There's also the science, the side that still believes in that society is basically divided into 2 classes, and one class is oppressed, which is a thing that you don't find in Foucault and Lyotard. That they don't believe in this idea anymore, I don't think.
Section 9.
Section 9.
Narratives of the legitimation of knowledge.
Okay. I'm reading it in Hebrew, but okay.
Yeah.
We could elaborate next time on these particular issues, and maybe we can bring in a guest philosopher to chat with us.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. But in the meantime, maybe look over that part in particular, and maybe see if you can see where I'm coming from, or maybe see where I'm possibly misinterpreted Lyotard. But it does seem to me that he's interested in, I guess, subverting these meta narratives and taking advantage of them, not so much transcending them.
But I always thought he just wanted to use them to smash up. Like I thought he wanted this to happen, the smashing up of the grand meta narratives. I also thought that Foucault wanted to destabilize knowledge and to use these things to attack. Like he explicitly wanted to expose the order of things, or the way, the artificial ways our societies have been structured, in order to try to expose the workings of power and discourse.
Yes.
And he explicitly wanted to do that in order to make it harder for power to function. That's my understanding too. I guess, I don't know, created. He never explicitly says it, but my understanding is that he ideally would want a new paradigm shift where, all of these things weren't ordered in the same way anymore. And he may have had good reason. Like, I mean, he was gay, for example, and famously his book on the history of sexuality shows the way that knowledge is codified and then used for the ends of power. And it's one of the reasons this stuff has been so influential on the.
He does cherry pick a lot.
SJW. Well, of course he cherry picks, but yeah.
There is, yes, but there is no way out of it. In Foucault, we can't get to a world where there will not be power. And and I don't think he wants a paradigm shift. He just wants to expose. Look, when you expose a paradigm, the paradigm shift will happen, because you are once you are aware of the paradigm, you are out of the paradigm. The paradigm is, by definition, is something that is you are unconscious of. It controls your mind. But exposing the paradigm can only be done one step at a time. It's not. He's not trying to. I don't feel that he's trying to bring a paradigm shift. He's just trying to slowly expose the paradigm, and which the idea is that it gives the greater freedoms for when you are aware of the things that are controlling your mind, of the processes that control your mind, the ideas and the powers. So that's what I'm getting from Foucault, and
I think these guys are more radical than you think they are. That's my personal opinion, but you're entitled to your reading, and my reading is that they're
like I said, those guys are French, and they write like they're poets, and one reason is that they want it to be vague, because they don't want Derrida especially was terrified that his thought will become a doctrine. So it has to be very elusive, so no one can make a doctrine out of it, so it's open to many interpretations and all that, and they had the same.
Maybe though that's just the pretext that he gave for making his work incomprehensible.
Or just that they're all terrible writers, which would be my reading of it.
No, actually, they're not. I mean, Foucault and Derrida are actually good writers, and they say that in French, they do have poetic skills, but
if Foucault at his best can be quite exacting in the way that he describes things. I actually like his like Birth of the Clinic and stuff like that. I find that when he's categorizing, when he's gets into kind of like these descript, like
that's the frustrations I have is that I'm very interested, I'm following, and then he starts to get into something that I just don't understand what he's talking about, and I lose him. And I was with you. Why are you waxing poetical?
I don't know if you heard of the anecdote of when Foucault had Searle over at his apartment. Did you guys hear about that little story?
Yeah.
No, I don't know about it.
Well, Foucault has John Searle at his apartment, and they're chatting about politics and knowledge and so on. And at one point, Searle stops Foucault and he says to him, when you're talking to me about these things, about the relationship between knowledge and power, and about the social contingency of all these things, about the prison and the clinic and sexuality, when you explain these things to me in your words, it's very clear to me what you're talking about. I don't agree with a lot of it. I think there are problems, but at least I can understand the things that you're saying. That being said, when I try to read your books, I get completely lost. I have no idea what the hell you're talking about. I mean, what's going on? Is there a problem with the translation? It seems to me that the writing of these books is absolutely terrible, and it's not really matching the kind of what you're telling me right now. There seems to be a kind of disconnect. And Foucault laughs, and he says, no, there's not a problem with the translation. Here in France, it's different. If you want to be taken seriously by your fellow scholars, at least 25% of what you write has to be complete bullshit.
Yeah. I said it in the video. Yes, it's not just the postmoderns. Look, Albert Camus is someone I like him as an artist very much. I think he's a great writer and playwright, and is an honest thinker, and in his philosophy. But also, sometimes he just gets into his lyrical mode. And then he writes things that are philosophically just not accurate, and just for the nice turn of phrase. And yeah,
Foucault is by no means the worst offender when it comes to saying nonsense. Lyotard and Derrida have said much worse things, at least from a scientific perspective, than Foucault. Even in the postmodern.
Did any of you read? Discipline and Punish. Did any of you read Foucault, Discipline and Punish?
Yeah,
that one I didn't. No,
because that one I read it like in one sit, and I just followed everything. And
I mean, well, for what it is, it's good. For what it is, it's a good book. But I don't know that there's. I was always taught that you should write with clarity. Because if your writing isn't clear,
I think he's clear in this book. In this book,
clear. In Discipline and Punish, he's clear. But overall, there are. I mean, if we're going to just talk about Foucault, there are.
It's a 25% bullshit.
Right. I mean, for me, one of the worst offenders is Sartre. I mean, you mentioned Sartre, like, I mean, Being a Nothingness is this big, thick book. You could sum it up in a page of A4. Like, I mean, it's like, in terms of the actual ideas in it, it's 6 bullet points.
Yeah. I typed it up in a cafe over the course of 2 weeks, and it shows.
Yeah, you can tell it's just not very good. And I would say I'd give Foucault more credit than that. But there are real vagaries at the heart of his system. Like, there's a complete absence of subjectivity for like what defines the subject. Never answered. Never even begins to answer that question. Like he just states, well, there's no outside of power. Okay. So he just there are so many unanswered questions when you start to drill down into the ideas of Foucault, which is.
We are approaching 2 hours.
We should probably wrap this up, chaps.
And maybe we'll discuss more Lyotard, and next time we'll just talk about this. Just the thing that we were talking about.
Sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. This has been Complete Crock. Have a good one.
Cheers, chaps.